Back in 2016, I curated an exhibition entitled Monuments Should Not Be Trusted. For my contribution to The Secret Life of, I have chosen Days of Pride and Sorrow, a series of photographs featured in that exhibition and shot in 1980 by the Belgrade-based artist and photographer Goranka Matić. For a bit of context, the exhibition was shown at Nottingham Contemporary in the UK, and it showcased work by over 30 leading artists and groups from the so-called golden years of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the period between the early 1960s and the mid-1980s. The show included over 100 artworks and material culture artifacts, and through 4 themes explored key contradictions of this single-party state. A country with a system built after the Second World War on socialist principles, yet a country immersed in what has been termed utopian consumerism. The work, Days of Pride and Sorrow, consists of a series of photographs taken by the photographer Goranka Matić. She has been an active presence and a key participant of the Belgrade independent art and music scenes for many years. She documented much of the activities around Belgrade's Student Cultural Center, which opened in 1971 and which was a multi-art form art center, space for discourse and gatherings, and a hub of artistic and musical avant-garde practices, from conceptual art to punk, from new wave to pop. Her photographs of bands and live events are by now legendary and frequently appear in both media and books documenting the period. This series of photographs mark a powerful moment in Yugoslav collective consciousness. They document shop windows in the center of Belgrade immediately after the death of the Yugoslav president Josip Broz Tito on the 4th of May 1980, showing their individual ways of paying tribute to the president. To understand how momentous this event was for Yugoslav citizens, it is important to explain that Tito, as the president of Yugoslavia, was also what was called a president for life. His image as the figurehead was woven into every aspect of Yugoslav people's lives. And of this phenomenon, we can definitely speak as the cult of personality. Beyond being a political leader with an active and respected international profile, he was someone with a huge media presence. His image was to be found hanging in the lobby of every public building, school, office, hospital, shop. His birthdays were celebrated in a grand style, his travels widely reported on the news, but also in magazines and in film bulletins. Whatever any of us thought about Tito and his politics, he was very present in our lives, and even if things were not as simple as that, there was a definite correlation between Tito and Yugoslavia as a project. The reason I chose this work over so many in the exhibition is that in a strange way, its sensibility of being on the brink of change actually feels a little like the moment we're currently living through during the COVID-19 pandemic and during lockdown. The sense of normal life suddenly changing, the sense of a collective concern and collective uncertainty, and to an extent, a sense of shock. As someone who was a 10-year-old in Belgrade, Yugoslavia at the time, I'm reminded of that strange feeling trying to continue as normal and to keep going with your routine, but with the everyday also being profoundly altered. Back then, Tito's death stopped us in our tracks for a moment. We knew that things would change, whether we'd hoped for that or not, and the changes that were to come were, to at least some extent, going to be out of our control as ordinary citizens. And that is the feeling I get now as well in the situation we find ourselves in. Of course, it may seem ridiculous to compare the death of a leader with a global pandemic, but these images represent not only the death of an individual, but a moment which, at least symbolically, marked the beginning of an unraveling of a political system, which was the only thing many of us knew up until that point. A sense of staring into the abyss, not knowing what was to come. In the same way that the first days of lockdown have been simultaneously frightening, quiet, and difficult to process, the days after Tito's death symbolized the end of an era and the beginning of something unknown that we were not sure how we were going to navigate. In such a situation, everything becomes strange, the simplest actions and events in life are rethought, and there is a sense of collective slowing down. What stands out in days of pride and sorrow is the way that the mundane and the ceremonial coexist, and the way that the collective starts to emerge across all these vastly different businesses. In the work, we see how these individual shops are continuing their normal trade, while also, in many cases, quite awkwardly acknowledging the collective event that has just taken place. In many cases, we see bizarre combinations of objects for sale in the windows: football kits, shoes, cosmetic products, hairdressers' products, which are combined with images of mourning, often making for quite surreal and sometimes even comical displays. Goranka Matić took over 50 images as part of this series. We included a selection of 12 in the exhibition at Nottingham Contemporary. They are close to my heart, as I remember those days very well. I have a selection of these photographs on my wall at home and have been looking at them every day during lockdown as I work from home. In a strange way, they have been quite comforting as a reminder of strange moments and challenges one faces in life, but which will inevitably be overcome.